The evening sun was still low when Federal Judge James Wilson stepped out of the jewelry store on the city's Main Street. He loved this area, calm, cozy, with narrow streets paved with old stones and elegant shops where you could find unique items. His refined suit and glasses, which emphasized his dignity, suited the place well. The judge was used to people's gazes, but this time he felt something was different, as if the atmosphere around him was heavier, tense. As soon as he stepped onto the sidewalk, the sound of car brakes caught his attention, and 2 police cars pulled up nearby. A few officers in dark uniforms got out, and one, a tall young man, immediately walked toward the judge. Wilson noticed his focused gaze and instantly sensed that something was wrong. "Excuse me, sir," the officer said as he approached the judge. "Could we check your documents? We suspect suspicious activity." James calmly stopped and looked at the officer. A real professional, he thought, but something about this seemed off. The police seemed to view him not as an ordinary passerby, but as a potential target for their premium detentions. "What exactly concerns you?" the judge asked in a calm voice, looking the officer in the eyes. The officer, maintaining eye contact, seemed momentarily confused but quickly regained composure. "It's a standard check. You came out of the store, and everything seems as though you might have violated the law," he answered, trying to sound confident. James paused for a moment. He knew how often official positions were abused. Instead of taking this as an insult, he chose a different path. Calmly, he took out his badge and handed it to the officer. "I am Judge James Wilson," he said, looking the officer in the eye. "I understand. How would you like to proceed?" The officer's expression darkened for a moment, and his colleague, who had been standing nearby, saw the reaction and understood that this was not just someone they could easily take advantage of. At that moment, James felt something important happening between them. It was a moment when he had to step forward, not to defend himself, but to show that power should not always be based on fear and suspicion. "Let me ask," he said, changing his tone. "Could you explain why you stopped me? Were there any specific circumstances that made you doubt me?" The officer looked nervously at his partner, who calmly approached them. "We're conducting a check operation," the second officer replied, still keeping his distance. "But clearly, this doesn't concern you. You may go." James simply nodded. He stayed in place for a few more seconds, watching the officers discuss the situation among themselves. He didn't intend to prove he was right, nor did he seek an apology. His goal was to show that sometimes it's necessary to ask questions to make people think that what they're doing isn't just following orders, but taking responsibility. Taking a few steps forward, he paused and looked back. The officers were still standing, but the tension they had tried to create was gone. But this time, something had changed. James realized that his calmness had not just caused the officers to falter. It had opened a new path for them to understand that, in situations where safety and justice go hand in hand, only through dialogue can stereotypes be broken. Now he knew that even a small step could change the course of events, but where it would lead him, that was still unclear. Under the August sun of Jacksonville, the square in front of the jewelry store was filled with pedestrians enjoying the warm summer day. Several people stood by the entrance, browsing the windows and admiring the precious jewelry. Among them stood out a man in a classic black suit who was leisurely exiting the store. This was Federal Judge Edward Griffin. His face appeared calm, even somewhat indifferent. He had a box in his hands containing an elegant gold ring for his wife. Jacksonville was a city that knew and respected its judges. Griffin, without a second thought, walked toward his car, where his chauffeur was already waiting. He looked like an ordinary man in a high position, without any hint of trouble or worry. But just as he approached his car, a police car stopped a few steps away. The doors opened, and two officers, young Sergeant Carls and his partner, Officer Martinez, stepped out and walked toward Griffin. In their eyes was the usual confidence that came from knowing they always got what they wanted if their suspicions seemed plausible. "Good afternoon, sir," said Sergeant Carls, stopping Griffin. "Can we talk for a few minutes?" Griffin, without changing his facial expression, stopped. There was no fear or irritation in his eyes, only calm. He watched the officers, sensing that the situation might not be as it seemed at first glance. "I'm listening," he replied. "We're just checking," Sergeant Carls began, pausing briefly. "Do you have anything with you that could raise suspicion? Perhaps you purchased something without paying." Edward felt his neck tighten slightly at this absurd statement, but he remained calm. "It's a regular purchase," he said, pointing to the box in his hands. "I bought a gift for my wife. As you can see, I paid for it." Carls and Martinez exchanged glances before turning back to Griffin. It was clear their aim wasn't entirely peaceful. "It's just a routine check," Carls insisted. "Can we take a look at your bag?" Griffin felt his heart rate quicken slightly, but his voice remained steady and calm. "I'm sorry, but I have no intention of allowing you to search my belongings without proper grounds. You know that such actions require a warrant." His words were calm but firm. Martinez paused for a moment, but Carls, upon hearing this, took a step back and approached his partner. "Let me ask again, sir, are you sure you're not hiding anything?" Griffin looked at them again, his gaze firm. His rights and duties as a judge allowed him to remain calm and assert his dignity firmly. He stepped back, looking at the officers. "If you have any doubts, contact my lawyer. But I assure you, I haven't done anything illegal," he said calmly. Carls and Martinez stood stunned. They hadn't expected such direct resistance. They were used to easy arrests where people, frightened, couldn't stand up for their rights. So, they didn't know how to react to such a determined man. "All right," said Carls, not knowing what else to add. "But you still have to cooperate with us. This could take some time." Griffin, without changing his stance, took the box with the ring and turned back to his car. "This won't take long," he said. "Your attempts to detain innocent people are pointless. I hope next time you'll be more careful about who you choose to detain." With these words, he got into his car, leaving the officers standing there with somewhat confused expressions. This was just the beginning. Griffin's car quickly headed toward his home, leaving the police car behind. Outside the window, the city showed no signs of serious danger, but the judge felt that the situation was escalating. Today's event had been just a small sign that a true wave of change had begun in Jacksonville, a wave that seemed poised to affect everyone, even him. When he arrived at his elegant house on the outskirts of the city, Griffin approached the entrance with the feeling that nothing would ever be the same again. He had a strange sense that he had become part of some game that no one had explained to him. It seemed that everything happening around him had a deeper purpose, and even his own decisions were becoming mere links in a chain moving without his involvement. He opened the door and entered the living room, where his wife greeted him. Laura was a wonderful woman, with whom he had been together for over 10 years. She always considered him a decisive and strong man, but this time there was an unexplained anxiety on her face. "Are you all right?" Laura asked, noticing the change in his mood. Griffin smiled, trying to hide his concern. "Yes, just a long day," he replied, trying to remain calm. "But I bought something special for you." He handed her the box containing the gold ring he had mentioned earlier. Laura took it, and her eyes lit up with joy. "It's beautiful. You always know what I like," she said, kissing him on the cheek. But even this moment couldn't completely drown out his anxiety. In his mind, the thought lingered that the police officers on the street weren't a coincidence. Someone was watching him, and it was only a matter of time before they dug even deeper. Suddenly, his mobile phone rang. He glanced at the screen, an unknown number. Taking a deep breath, Griffin answered. "Griffin." "We know everything, Edward. came the cold, emotionless voice on the other end. "And this is just the beginning." The judge flinched. The words left no room for doubt. Someone was truly following him. Someone who knew more than he could imagine. "Who is this?" he tried to ask, but the voice at the other end simply chuckled softly. "Don't play with us, Edward. You're already in this. And don't try calling the police. They won't be able to help you now." The line went dead. Griffin, feeling his heart race, set the phone down on the table. He couldn't understand who it could be, but he knew that in the coming days, his life was about to change drastically. Laura looked up from the ring and looked at him with a concerned expression. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Griffin forced himself to calm down and said, "It's just a phone prank. Nothing serious." But deep down he understood this wasn't a prank. And soon he would have to face something far more terrifying than mere blackmail or threats. The next day, Griffin received a letter. The envelope had no markings or address, only one word written in black marker: revenge. Feeling the tension pulsing under his skin, he opened the letter. Inside was only one line: "You won't escape us, Edward. Get ready." Now he understood that his life had become part of something bigger than just professional intrigue or political maneuvering. And this game was only just beginning. Griffin sat at the table, clutching the letter in his hands, studying every written symbol. He couldn't understand who was behind these threats, but one thing was clear: this was more than just surveillance. They knew his weaknesses, knew what motivated him. And that's why the situation was becoming increasingly dangerous. Laura, still unaware of the full scope of what was happening, continued to peacefully go about her business, but Griffin felt the weight of this new reality pressing down on him. All these years he had lived in his stable world, where he was a judge, a man who decided the fates of others. But now, it seemed that his own fate was being played out in the shadows of mysterious forces. He glanced at his phone, and again, just like that morning, the screen lit up an unknown number. Griffin didn't answer, but his heart began to beat faster. He realized that no escape or ignoring it would help anymore. His life would never be the same. The unknown number called again, and unable to resist, Griffin finally answered. Griffin, the same cold voice spoke. "You're still alive? Good. We want to give you a chance." The judge held his breath, trying to understand what this chance meant. "I don't understand. What do you want from me?" he asked, trying to keep his composure. "Just one small task," the voice replied. "You'll find it easy if you want to live. You'll get the location where you need to be. You'll go there, take what you need, and return. Of course, if you want all of this to end." "What's this place?" Griffin's voice grew sharper, fear creeping in. "That's not your question, Edward," the voice responded softly. "This is your task. If you fail, it will be your last mistake. Just remember, they see everything." A sharp click signaled the end of the conversation. Griffin slowly placed the phone down on the table. He could feel his hands trembling, but he kept them under control. He had to act. This couldn't be left unattended. He started thinking through the possible scenarios. Who were these people? Why had they chosen him? And most importantly, what did they want from him? The mention that they see everything added another layer of anxiety. He knew there were things in his life that shouldn't come to light. Maybe they already had all the information about his most secret decisions, about what he feared, and even more, perhaps they were tracking his every move. He glanced at Laura, who was just leaving the room. She was the light of his life, but she couldn't be involved in this. He couldn't put her at risk. "Laura," he said, feeling how hard it was to get the words out, "I have to go for a few hours. This is about my work." She turned to him with a questioning look, but he tried to appear convincing. "It'll be fine, don't worry. I'll be back." Laura nodded, though she looked unsettled. Griffin, slipping the letter into his pocket, walked to the door. He had no idea where these threats might lead him, but one thing was certain. If he didn't do what they wanted, he would lose everything. His car roared down the old streets of a city, where an ordinary day had long ceased to be ordinary. Griffin drove through the dark streets, trying to suppress the nervous tremor. Every turn, every shadow that appeared from the darkness reminded him that he wasn't alone. Someone or something was watching him closely, and he couldn't decide which terrified him more, the unknown or the fact that he was trapped in a web he had created himself. The city felt unfamiliar to him, even though he had lived here all his life. Griffin didn't even notice when he had left the familiar areas behind. From time to time, he checked his phone again, but there were no new calls or messages. Through the windshield, he saw a bright light at the end of the street. It was an old industrial building, burned down to its foundation. It looked abandoned, but on the outer walls, there was a sign that he couldn't immediately make out. He stopped nearby and got out of the car. The silence was deafening, like just moments before a storm. He glanced at his message again and realized the place was marked exactly. It was becoming hard for him to feel that his life was in someone else's hands. He approached the door, which was open. Deep inside the building, he saw faint light spilling through a small crack. With his heart racing, he entered. Time passed, but with every step, it felt as though he was descending deeper into darkness. His footsteps echoed off the empty walls, and the feeling of being hunted never left him. What was this place? Why did it feel like all of this had happened before? For a few minutes, it seemed like he had a chance to escape, but when he reached the end of the corridor, a figure appeared before him, dark, indistinct, almost unreal. A man in a dark hat and long coat stood in the doorway, leading to a deeper room. "You've come." The voice was familiar, yet strange at the same time. Griffin felt the air grow thick and looked at the man. "Who are you?" he said, his voice betraying him. "What do you want from me?" "I'm just watching," the stranger replied. "And now it's your turn to make a choice." He felt his heart start to race as the light at the end of the corridor went out. There were no more chances to escape. Griffin's choice was limited. But what choice was that? Stay in this trap or go to the one who was waiting for him behind the door? The man's shadow stretched across the wall, and Griffin, deciding that this was his last chance, stood up and took a step forward. And when the door closed behind him, he realized that his life had only been part of a game he had accidentally entered. Those who were watching had won. But he didn't yet know what happened after that moment. His last thought was whether there was any way to choose an exit from this maze. But it was already too late. The door quietly closed behind Griffin, and an eerie silence enveloped him. His heart was beating so loudly that it seemed the entire world was trembling from the sound. He stood in a dark room that appeared empty, yet he felt the presence of something invisible watching him from all sides. The man in the hat stepped forward, his face remaining in the shadows. His voice was deep but clear, like an echo from another world. "You are not the first, and you probably won't be the last. But you are the first to face this." Hearing these words, Griffin felt a chill sink into his bones. It seemed that all these years he had been running from something, but now he realized that his life, all this time, had been part of something much bigger, much more complex. Perhaps this was a test. Or maybe this was his chance to change what had seemed unchangeable. He raised his head, and although fear filled him inside, he responded firmly, "I'm not afraid." The stranger only smiled, and instead of continuing the game, slowly backed away. He turned toward the door leading to another part of the building and opened it. Maybe you're not afraid, but you still can't change what has already happened. Your path is just one part of a chain, but every choice comes at a cost. Griffin stood still, trying to understand the meaning of these words. What was this? Everything that had happened tonight made him think that he hadn't just walked into a trap. he was part of something bigger. What was left for him? To go or to stay? Walking toward the door, he looked back, but the man had already disappeared into the darkness. The silence filled the room again. And here, in this impenetrable darkness, Griffin made his choice. He stepped through the threshold and into the dark city. But this time he was ready. Griffin knew that change starts with oneself. He didn't have all the answers, but his journey continued. What mattered was not how he got to this place, but how he would leave it. And perhaps this step was the beginning of the changes he had been waiting for. Only time would tell if his choice was the right one.